Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody in between, welcome to another episode of the Chaps Chat Cats. My name is Jake, and I'm joined in the virtual studio by two chaps, Sambo and Johnny. How are ya?
Pretty good.
Good. Just recovering from some heart palpitations there. When you said you were going to use the little animation thing, like the logo thing, I just thought you meant in post. I didn't know you were going to play it then. And I've got my
No.
volume turned up very loud, so there's I was just sitting here and I kind of like looked away from the screen at the wrong time. It was like, and I absolutely
Sam's earbuds
shat my panties.
destroyed. We are, of course, a part of the Hoops Crew Media Network, and on the episode
I know that now.
tonight, we're going to be talking all about the Cats v Bulldogs AFL Round 4 action. It's gather round, chaps. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. If you're on Spotify, hit the follow button. And if you want extra access to more content from the Hoops Crew, go on over and subscribe to the Patreon channel. Details scrolling at the bottom of your screen. All right, let's jump into it though, chaps, because it is gather round, and we're going to gather round now and talk about the Cats tackling the Dogs at Adelaide Oval. Obviously, we played the Doggies twice last year. We seem to play the Doggies twice quite a bit, which is fine by me. It's generally a pretty good, solid hit out for both teams. What are your sort of general thoughts going into this one, particularly, I guess, as we reflect a bit on the games last year? 1-1, lost one. Yeah, how are you feeling going into the matchup?
Pretty good.
Who's going to talk?
Yeah,
Johnny's
feeling good about this one. Cats coming off a pretty impressive first 3 games. Dogs, not. I think Dogs are firing at all cylinders just yet. They're a bit inconsistent, so I think this is a good test for both teams to see where, like, especially for the Cats, where their midfield stacks up against a really, pretty potent Dogs midfield, and just also see where the Dogs will, if the Dogs can, step up to that next level and play against, hopefully a Cats team that's going to be in the top 4 throughout the year. So I think, it's going to be a tight, tough game, but I think the Cats will be pretty well set for it, pretty well settled. Good to have very few injuries, and I'm just really looking forward to it as a good test, especially, as I said, for that midfield coming up against the Dogs. Pretty stacked midfield.
Yeah,
it presents an interesting challenge. Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, no, that's right. I think our internet just laid us over the top of each other there. Just likes to make things even more interesting. I agree. I'm on the same page. I actually like that we're coming off a tougher game than it could have been, a tougher game than it looked like being for a quarter there, a tougher game than I probably wanted right beforehand. But actually, I'd probably have more questions and concerns if I felt like we had these wins without being fully tested. If there were 3, walk-ins and we were just running away with it, like, it's been pretty nerve-wracking sometimes this year, and there's been some real tests. But I actually think that favors us going into such a tough scenario. Like as you said, Johnny, the Dogs can be a bit inconsistent. So this year, and so if you don't go in fully prepared and they come out firing on all cylinders, then it's not going to go well for you. And gather round itself is a strange kind of. It's still so new, bit of a strange atmosphere. There'll be players in the squad, which we'll get to team selection. But I'm assuming there'll be players in the squad that didn't play last year, that weren't there for gather round last year. Like Jai Clark, I assume that I didn't actually look at the team selection because I knew we'd go into it on the pod, but I assume he'll be in there, and there'll be some unexplored territory for some of the players. So yeah, all that to say that it's just it's a bit of an unknown. It's a bit of an unknown game that we're heading into. So having been tested in a multitude of ways, I think actually stirred us up a bit. And I think if we can just come out and play the way we've been playing at our best, even with the outs we've got, yeah, I'm as always, regardless of the opposition, I am confident. But yeah, pretty excited to see how
Yeah.
we go.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, as you chaps have said, the Cats 3 wins to start the season, which I think on the season preview we talked about. I think generally we accepted a 3-1 start. We'd be over the moon about that. So to have that already banked, regardless of the result against the Dogs, is pretty fantastic. It's a good way to start the season and a great opportunity to go 4-0. And then you're really starting to, if you think about across the course of a season, 12 to 13 wins pretty much banks you a final spot. Then, you're, a third of the way there if you bank a fourth win now. So that's pretty massive. The Dogs obviously come into it off the back of a couple of strong wins, which came after I think what would have been regarded as a bit of a frustrating loss. They lose by 45 points to Melbourne to open the season, but an interesting one in that Melbourne had actually already played a game in round 0. And my theory about that coming into the season, I remember chatting about it with Jacko, about the fact that I think it was actually a bit of an advantage to play a game in round 0. Then you come up against a team that's not up at the pace yet, not up at the speed of the game. And I think there was a bit of that at play in that matchup. So the Dogs followed that up. They pretty comfortably handled the Gold Coast by 48 points. They destroyed West Coast 106 to 30. The Eagles only scored 3 goals. So, I'm sure that the Dogs won't be feeling they've learned that much about themselves out of that Eagles win, apart from the fact that we got the job done when we were meant to get the job done. And holding a side to 3 goals is always nice. So it's an interesting time, I think, for both sides to play each other. And as you chaps have already said, good opportunity to test each other early in the season, only a month in. Just to quickly reflect on the 2 games last year, the Cats were missing pretty significant personnel both times they played the Dogs. The first time around at Marvel Stadium, they were able to find their way to a win, and that was despite the fact that they had, just looking back through the lineup, no Patrick Dangerfield in the lineup, no Mitch Duncan in the lineup. They got the job, obviously no Cam Guthrie either, but got a win on the road up at Marvel Stadium. Dogs probably kicked themselves a bit with how they finished in front of goals. They finished 10-15-75 to Geelong's 15-7-97. And when you look at things like the player stats in that game, the Dogs had so much of the ball. It was about, off the top of my head there, about 9 of the top 10 or 8 of the top 10 ball winners on the ground with the Dogs. They just did not finish, whereas the Cats were sublime with how they finished and counter-attacked. Second time around, down at Cardinia Park, Geelong season was done and dusted. Dogs needed to win to keep a glimmer of finals hopes alive. The Cats basically didn't fly the white flag, but they basically knew that there was nothing to be gained for it from them. Brad Close was out injured. Radaglia was out injured. Cameron was out injured. Mitch Duncan was suspended. Tanner Bruin was injured. He didn't play either of the games against the Dogs last season. Tom Hawkins was injured, and Zach Tui was injured. So a forward line for the Cats the last time out down at Cardinia Park without Cameron, without Hawkins, it was, I think we'd all agree, probably including, Bulldog supporters, that it's always good to get a win down at Cardinia Park, like regardless of the situation. But the Cats did pretty much go in playing that one as a very early preseason game. This match, the stakes a little higher at Adelaide Oval. And let's talk about some team selection, chaps, because we've got the teams out for once. We don't have to wait. God, last week was awful. I was trying to record a VFL preview episode for the Patreon subscribers, and I was hitting refresh. I'm glad I didn't wait to record because they didn't land until about mid-afternoon Sunday, and I was trying to record on Friday afternoon. So these are the sides for the Cats. Zach Toohey and Reece Stanley are in. Toby Conway and O'Sheen Mullen out. Conway managed. O'Sheen Mullen omitted. So the Cats line up with Tom Stewart, Sam De Koning, Jake Kolodjasny, Zach Guthrie, Jack Henry, and Max Holmes in the back line. The centre line, Zach Toohey, Tanner Bruin, Mitch Duncan. Half forward, Brad Close, Tyson Stengel, Tom Hawkins. Full forwards, Jeremy Cameron, Brian Myers, Ollie Henry. The followers, Reece Stanley, Tom Atkins, Mark Blixarves. And on the interchange bench, you've got Ollie Dempsey, Brandon Parfitt, Jai Clark, Mark O'Connor, and Jack Bowes with the emergencies, O'Sheen Mullen, Conway, and Sean Manor. Sambo, I'll go to you first. Your thoughts on the ins and outs, and then Johnny, your thoughts on the general lineup as it stands at the moment.
Well, I mean, we obviously kind of knew the Conway making way for Stanley. Like they were pretty transparent around that with his selection last week. I mean, I guess there was a slight doubt shown because of how well Conway did perform. I thought, I certainly wouldn't have raged if they selected him again, giving him another, especially early in the season. Like I know, as you said, Jake, the stakes are a little higher, the opposition's a little, not a little, significantly, I would say, significantly more at our level than Hawthorn are generally considered to be. So with that in mind, Stanley's the obvious choice, but it's still early in the season and we're on a pretty good wicket, so I wouldn't have been upset if they'd given Conway another run, given him a bit of consistency. But he may get to get out there and stretch his legs. I'd like to see how he matches up, going toe to toe with English. But I'm sure he'll have. Sorry, was that?
He beat him last year in the last game.
Yeah. They had a really good sort of tussle, and I'd like to see, see how he's developed and how that goes. How English maybe handles him, having played against him before. But yeah, I think Stanley is the obvious choice, as we like to say. And Zach Toohey in for Mullen. Yeah, I guess I'm a little more on the fence about that one. I imagine the caliber of opposition we're going up against and the history. I think Tui has some pretty recent history with the Dogs, and that may that may like have fed into it a bit. That I think Tui's he's a fierce competitor, and I imagine if that more than anything is the quality that we're banking on him bringing, as opposed to any particular role or area of the field being filled. I imagine it's more about his experience without Dangerfield in the team, so a bit more experience will be good. And also, yeah, I think just his fiery competitiveness in general, but certainly in recent history against the Dogs, is probably what tipped him over the edge, I would say.
Thoughts on the general lineup, Johnny? How it stands at the moment? You're pretty happy with how that's starting, 22/23 is looking for the Cats?
Yeah, can't complain about that. It looks pretty much full strength, apart from obviously no Dangerfield and no Guthrie, no Rowan. But yeah, I think the way they've been playing, it's hard to change much of the lineup. It's obviously Zach Toohey, Reece Stanley. I think on my end feels very obvious choices to bring back in, especially with only a 5-day turnaround. I don't think they want to subject Conway and Mullen to playing 2 games really close together in case of injuries, in case they don't aren't able to fully recover as quickly as some of the other guys. So yeah, that all made sense to me. And as we said on our recap pod about the Hawthorn the Scummers game, there was no real reason to make any more changes to that team, especially in that midfield, the way those guys held themselves in the midfield for the 3 quarters for that game last week on Monday. Really stood up really well. And yeah, as I said, it would have beggared belief to make any changes in that midfield apart from Reece Stanley in for Conway and obviously Zach Toohey for Mullen. Yeah, I think apart from that, it's all looking really good. Cats are looking settled. I'm really looking forward to it, and it should be a fun tight tussle. And yeah, I'm just it's always good fun to come up against the Bulldogs because they pose a pretty good
Mm.
challenge for the Cats each time, and it's never a blowout either way.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree. Yeah, totally with you guys there. Have either of you guys managed to catch like any of the Dogs games so far this season? Like I haven't watched a minute of them this year, but I don't know if you guys have managed to see anything and anything that stood out maybe.
I
Um,
watched the Melbourne game. Was that the one that was that
Okay.
the loss?
That was the
F
opening. Yeah.
yeah. I caught that one, and from memory, they looked a little bit like some of the stuff with the Cats, where they were in the earlier rounds, where they were putting on a lot of heat and they were locking the ball up, and then getting hit on the counter attack. Whereas in that particular game, I think the issue was that when they were locking it up there, their conversion rate wasn't fantastic, so those counter attacks were really hurting
Mhm.
them. But I mean, I haven't watched the game since then, but by all reports, it seems that they've sort of tidied that up and fixed that up. Their conversion rate seems to be tidier. So I imagine it could be it could be a not an immovable force, sorry, an unstoppable force
Mm.
versus immovable object. It might be a case of two unstoppable forces. I like unless there's some great
Mm.
tactical changes. They looked a little similar to me. As I said, I've only watched the one game and some highlights, so I could be speaking out of turn. But to my eye, it looked like they were approaching the game in a similar kind of way, um, trying to get it up the ground as quickly as possible, and then pushing quite deep forward to try and lock it in there. Using their smalls to sort of hassle and get it into the forwards, and then kind of coughing it
Mm.
up inevitably, and it costing you at the back a little bit, but it's an accepted loss, I think, in that kind of game style. So I'll be interested to see if there's some magnets moved, and if someone blinks and tries to play a more
Mm.
negative sum game to like counteract the other one, or if we're going to have a real just like it's all about that middle, and whoever gets it forward and is more has a greater conversion rate might just come away with the win in a really high scoring game. I don't know. That's just based off the very little I've seen of the Dogs and based off what we've seen from the Cats. I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of the case, but yeah,
Mm.
we'll see.
Yeah,
definitely
definitely.
will.
I'm
Yeah, I know.
definitely looking forward to seeing that midfield battle, like the
Yeah.
followers thing of Stanley, English, Bond v Blixarves. I really hope that's the matchup, and then Atkins and Liberatore. If you look at where they're set to line up, I think that's really fun. What were you going to say, Johnny?
I was just going. I haven't watched any of the Dogs games because they've been on when I've been at work, so haven't had a chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard the same things as what Sam was saying. They look good. They move the ball cleanly, but they're also vulnerable to a bit of counter attack, similar to the Cats. So I think this is like
Mm.
a good meeting time. And it feels like for both teams. Feels like this is a really good test early on for both teams to see what game style holds up the best.
And Ed Richards back in the team for the Dogs. Caleb Poulter omitted, and Ed Richards carved us up the second time we
I
played the
say,
Dogs. He
yeah.
had 29 touches.
Mm.
He had 14 touches and a goal the first time. So it'll be interesting to see, what sort of influence he has over the game. He's sort of their version of Gary Rowan, in a weird sense, another fast redhead sort of thing. Who's got pace to burn. Let's talk some of what we want to see to round out the public part of our Cats v Dogs preview. I'll come to you first, Sambo, then to you, Johnny, and then I'll round us out. What's one thing you want to see on Saturday night at Adelaide Oval, Sambo?
Um, it's a bit of a weird one because it's almost a little bit more Bulldogs focused. Um, strangely. In terms of the way that I would like to see them being influenced. I think the Cats game plan will be working if most of the Bulldogs goals are dirty goals from their smalls. You know what I mean? If Waitman's, if he's their high scorer and he kicks 3 or 4 goals or something, but we're keeping their tools locked down, then that's, I think, yeah, it's not necessarily something that I've created that I want to see, but I think it will be a sign that it's working, because I think that those are the goals that we're kind of willing to cough up at the moment. Is those counter attack, couple of linking plays from the opposition to get down there as quick as possible, and a half forward or someone able to snap a goal over the top of our fullback from 40 out or something like that. I think our matchups are really good. We had a big discussion of it. Well, you guys, I read your big discussion about the the concept of tools and matchups and all that kind of stuff. I think in general, I think our backline has in the past had the measure of the Bulldogs' tools in a lot of ways. I think Jamara has come a long way even since his impressive year last year. So haven't really dealt with him at this level yet. But I tend to think that we should have those guys locked down, and that the Bulldogs are going to have to employ their smalls and their mids to get a lot of goals. And that, to me, won't be such a big problem. As long as we're converting at the other end, I'm willing to accept some of those scrubby sort of goals.
What about you, Johnny?
Like
What's one thing you're wanting to see?
One thing I'm wanting to see is I'm wanting to see Cats midfield take it right up to the Dogs midfield. As we've alluded to, the Dogs have a very strong midfield with Bontempelli, Liberatore, and Tim English. So I just want to see them either match the Bulldogs in terms of output or completely stop them and outclass them in terms of output, especially Bontempelli. I'd just like to see him be really shut down and have very little influence on the game. And I think if the Cats can shut him out of the game, it goes a long way to beating the Bulldogs pretty soundly in a way. But I think you have to do it with that whole midfield core. So I think after last week's game, the way the Cats were able to respond to Hawthorn getting on top in that second quarter really helped the Tanner Bruin, Parfitt, and Atkins get that confidence that they can do it against a pretty good Hawthorn midfield, which has been, they've competed very well, and take it up against a Dogs midfield that is the next step up to what the Hawks have. So I think, I just want to see them compete and beat the Bulldogs midfield. Not by a lot. I just want to see them get on top and sort of control in a way what the Dogs midfield do. And if we do that, I think we'll have a good victory.
Yeah, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. This isn't my one thing I want to see, but I really do hope the Cats roll with like Blix v Bontempelli, just because I really liked how we used that against Patrick Cripps in 2022 against Carlton, because they are such big midfielders. Well, they're such big mids, so they're used to having like size and power advantages. So then it's like when you put, a guy who can play in the ruck in on them, like it gives them a player to think about as well. And Blix can hurt you on the ground, in the air, going, through the midfield into attack. Like, I'd like to see that. It'd be fun. But the one thing I want to see is just continued improvement from Jai Clark. And I understand, like he's in his second year, and, you see online sometimes he comes a bit of criticism, he's not physically at the level yet, et cetera, but I don't think you can fault his effort. What I'll say is you can't fault the ferocity of his effort when it's at its absolute peak. What I could probably fault is sometimes there's a little bit of inconsistency. Sometimes he goes really hard, for 10, 15 minutes. Then there's other times where you sort of just see him maybe not get to that contest that he needs to get to. And then sometimes you see him fall over and get just pushed out of the contest. Other times you see, like in that last quarter, I think it was, or the third quarter actually, against Hawthorn, we just had that brilliant hard ball win where he just got crunched and spun out of it and got either a handball or a little short kick out. You're seeing all these little moments from Jai Clark. I'd just like to see, maybe even just an extra 2 or 3 in this game. That would be just an indication of steady improvement of like, we're seeing a lot of, maybe see 3, 4 things every week that you go, oh, we've got a special one. Let's see 6 or 7 this week where you just get to go, yeah, he's won the hard ball there when he should have. Yep. He made a good tackle there. He got off a clean disposal. So that's what I want to see, just a continued logical progression of Jai Clark's development as a player. And I'm glad they're continuing to give him more games, particularly now when Dangerfield's out. You've kind of got a bit of the luxury of it. Cam Guthrie's out. Once those 2 guys get healthy again, it's a bit of a different equation because he's probably a bit similar to Atkins and Parfitt, and you probably can't roll with all of those 3 and Danger and Cam Guthrie in the same side.
It's a tough one to have, especially since he's only played 4 games. Well, this is his 4th game coming up. So, as you said, to see continuous improvement is the ideal thing you want to see, and I think people online got to remember he's only played 3 games. He's still a rookie. So yeah, I think you're spot right on the money there. Where just seeing that steady improvement is the best way, and I think we're seeing that.
I was just
so far.
So I was just going to say we had I was just looking at the comparison, just going back to Sam's point about goals and who kicks them. The first game between Jamara, Norton, and Rory Lobb, they kicked 3 goals between them. The second time we played them, Norton got 3, Lobb got 3, and Jamara got 1. So they kicked 7 goals between them the second time around. So yeah, it does make a big difference. How you manage those guys and the midfield plays as much. We had this chat with Jacko in the chat. The midfield plays as much of a role in helping the back line. We've talked about that ad nauseum on the pod this season and last, and probably since we started. That is the end of our Cats v Dogs Gather Round public preview. We're now going to go behind the Patreon curtain and do our Patreon match predictions, which we do each week. If you would like to see that part of the show, if you'd like to listen to that part of the show, make sure you go on over to the Hoops Crew Patreon channel. You can get a 7-day free trial starting now. You can sign up for the 7 days, enjoy it for 7 days, then cancel it, never pay us $1, and just enjoy what we've got to offer on there for 7 days. You get early access to things like behind the play interview episodes. You get the Wednesday news wrap. You get VFL men's and women's coverage as well as the extended versions of these podcasts. So if you want to get a taste of what all that is about, then go on over and subscribe, start your 7-day free trial. All right, chaps, that's it. We'll be back in your YouTube feed on Monday night when we recap all of the action from this game. Until next time, go Cats.
Go Cats.
Go Cats.